Good evening and a warm welcome to the Rushcliffe Borough Council Growth and Development Scrutiny Group meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from the meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphone off when you're not speaking. It directs the cameras. And may I also ensure that you've switched your phones to silent. We have a guest this evening who is going to give us a presentation about the East Midlands Freeport. This is Mr. Dan Cooper, and my Head of Economic Growth Property Officer is Catherine Evans. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies for absence.
Okay. Any declarations of interest? No. Right, well then we move to the minutes of the last meeting. Now this was held on the 26th of March. And many of us we've had a reorganisation, and many of us are new to the Growth and Development Group, including myself. So in terms of the minutes, I am going to ask Councillor Way, who was the Vice Chairman at the time, to take us through them, because I think she has some points she'd like to make. And Councillor Debbie Mason was also at that meeting. Councillor Way.
Thank you, Chair. The minutes have missed out some of the discussion we had at the end of the meeting about the wording changes that were suggested to the guide. This has now been added to Resolution A, but the detail of discussion, in general terms, that is, the detail of discussion is missing from that bit. And I think there was something that Councillor Solomon said earlier on. And then on page 5, second paragraph down, it says it was largely accepted by members. I'm not happy with that sentence because it sounds like an opinion rather than a fact of what happened at the meeting. There was no show of hands or anything to indicate that. Apart from that, I think the rest of it's okay. Perhaps Councillor Mason could like to say something.
From our briefing, I was slightly concerned at the recommendation, which was to endorse the good practice guide for management of open spaces and forward it on to Cabinet for consideration. I felt that that should have forwarded with necessary amendations. Sorry?
That wording slightly changed following the briefing to say that additional changes recommended by the group and forwarded on to Cabinet consideration. So that bit was picked up.
Right, I'm looking at right, okay, so that bit has been completed then. Yeah. So that's to your satisfaction. But what about the rest?
I would say that the guide that was forwarded to Cabinet did have the changes in that we'd mentioned. Catherine sent me a copy of that. I was reasonably happy with the rest of it. I was just asking Councillor Mason if she was happy.
Yes, I'm happy with the rest of it now. I've heard you speak on it. Thank you.
So you're happy with that design?
Yeah.
I will, as I've said, Having dealt with the minutes and the matters that were of concern, we move to the East Midlands Freeport, pages 9 to 14, but we're having a presentation which Mr. Cooper is going to take us through. We now have copies that I think have just been printed off for you. Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me okay? Yep. It's probably just at this moment that I realise with a moment of panic that I probably should listen to my wife, because I can't actually see your nameplate, so I probably should get my eyes tested, as she keeps recommending, to be fair. So apologies if I don't refer to you by counting your name. I simply can't see your nameplates. Anyway, thank you very much, everyone, for having me here today. I'm here from East Midlands Freeport. My name is Dan Cooper. I am the Head of Communications and Inward Investment at the Freeport and one of the senior leadership team. If you're not familiar with Freeport, I'm going to take you through the basics, and then specifically on the site that's within Rushcliffe Borough Council's area, so that you can ask questions on that specific site. If you're able to just flick on to the next slide for me. So Freeports themselves are economic zones. They were initially created under the previous government. It was Rishi Sunak's sort of idea initially, and then they've been continued by the Labour government and endorsed within their industrial strategy recently as well. So the programme continues. They continue to support the government's industrial strategy, as I mentioned before. They're an integral part of that and part of the government's inclusive growth, and also tying into the East Midlands Combined County Authorities plans as well. The way that we're set up is that we're a public-private partnership. We have 6 public sector members. That's the billing authorities, so Rushcliffe, North West Leicestershire District Council, South Derbyshire District Council, and then the county authorities that sit above those, so Derbyshire, Nottinghamshire and Leicestershire. And one of those authorities is designated as our accountable body. So they're the ones who hold us specifically to account on financial prudence and so forth, which is Leicestershire County Council. They fulfil that role. They also act de facto in terms of receiving funds from government and how we sort of deploy those. But I'll come on more to that later. And then the 6 private sector members, as you'll see listed across there, are effectively either the site owners or the site developers. So for the 3 sites that we have, the site in Rushcliffe is Ratcliffe Power Station, which is owned and previously operated by Uniper. The site in and around East Midlands Airport is Manchester Airport Group, who own and operate East Midlands Airport, along with Segro and Maritime Transportation. They operate the railhead terminal that you can see just off Junction 24. And then the other site, which is a bit further down the A50, is just south of the Toyota plant, a large space. And again, I'll take you through the maps when we come to that point. And that is owned by Etwall Land, and Goodman is their developer. So that's the makeup of our board. For yourselves, your representative from Rushcliffe is Councillor Neil Clark, the leader of the council. And it's important to note that the funds and finance as to how that comes down to the Freeport is decided upon by the public sector members. We're a not-for-profit organisation. We don't send the funds that we generate to the private sector. It is wholly retained for the benefit of the East Midlands and decided upon by public sector members. So I'll loop back to that later. We were formally established in March 2023, and we have made significant progress. All of this really is set against the backdrop of the financial incentives that we have to offer companies to come into those sites. So the tax release and the customs release that I've mentioned before end in September 2031. So the clock is ticking in that respect, and that is actually quite helpful because it sharpens the minds of everybody, so you don't have a really elongated development timescale. We are all very much focused on that time frame. Could you go on to the next slide for me, please? So our ambition is to take these sites and turn them into low carbon industrial developments, to look at specifically for Uniper, low carbon energy production, how we can move from what has been a coal-fired power station into new low carbon energy production, whether that's advanced manufacturing, if it's looking at data centers, if it's looking at different uses, but the use types that we'll see in the economy in future. We're here to attract inward investment into those sites. It's not about, yes, we offer tax incentives, but if somebody was operating in, I don't know, Westbridge, for example, and said, I'm going to close my site here and I'm going to operate in East Midlands Freeport because it's cheaper for me financially to do that. We have a gateway process in place, which means that people have to apply for the business rates relief, and people would not be successful in gaining that those business rates relief if that was what we discovered them to be doing. The whole premises around this is new investment, not about displacing, and that's the framework that we have in place to safeguard against that. In terms of what we're here to do, our role is to create 28,000 jobs across the 3 sites. Over the 25 years of the programme, we're here to stimulate £9 million of GVA across the East Midlands. And then if I've done my job correctly and filled up all of these 3 sites, we will generate an income for the Freeport to use. Now, how this works.
Mr. Cooper, can I just ask you, how can you guarantee you're going to create 28,000 jobs?
Well, there are projections that sit as part of our business case. So each one of the Freeport sites themselves have had to put a financial business case together that was rigorously tested through government, and each of those have got certain job predictions. Now, clearly, for a certain particular site, it may be that our site that's by East Midlands Airport may be focusing on advanced logistics as one of their industries, and that might create a large amount of jobs. But we are still subject to market conditions. So if certain industries didn't perform as well as others, then we may not hit that target, depending on the types of industries that we attract. But that is the target, and that's what we're committed to achieve. Our partners and our partner organisations are also committed to do that. We're focused on delivering it, but clearly there is going to be some flex. If they went for lots of very people-heavy industries, then we may exceed that. But obviously, if they go the opposite way, then it flexes to suit.
So can I just then, sorry, you did say
No.
questions
Yes,
whilst you're talking. We are focusing on high technology industry,
Yes, and I'll come on to the sectors we're seeking to focus in a
not
couple
logistics
of slides.
necessarily.
Not logistics necessarily, but most of the sites will have a component of logistics if you're going to be doing manufacturing and so forth. It's not just let's have lots of sheds and because the market for that at the top of the golden triangle, there will be a component of that because it is part of the infrastructure, but it is not the sole component that we're focusing to deliver. So the way that the income stream that the Freeport gets is that the billing authority, so Rushcliffe Borough Council, North West Leicestershire District Council and South Derbyshire District Council have estimated formulas which they've agreed with government to ensure that you are not going to be at a detriment from the rates relief that we cover. So in essence, the Treasury is guaranteeing the income that you would have projected to receive had there been a development on that site. Anything that is generated above that formula comes to us as an income, and that is projected to be in the region of £1 billion over the life cycle of the Freeport. That is ring fenced for use and spending on projects that support infrastructure, skills, job creation and community projects across the East Midlands. And that's where the public sector members will make those decisions as to how that's going to be deployed. And our investment strategy that will govern and guide this has been agreed by the board and will be is going forward to the board on Monday actually, and will be published pretty soon afterwards. So we'll be able to share that with councillors, and we'd want to get input and views as to how we develop that further. So over the last year, we've made some key progress on three of our pillars. We're finalising our skills delivery plan, which I mentioned is going forward to our board on Monday. We've completed scoping work for a new sustainability strategy, which will provide the baseline data and targets that we need to monitor carbon performance across our sites. And we've also worked on our innovation strategy, which is aligned with the second phase of some of the investments that we've made that I'll come on to later. Primarily, one of the largest being at the University of Nottingham, which is a zero carbon innovation centre looking at propulsion technologies of the future and how they can be scaled up from an idea and a prototype into large scale production which would suit somewhere like the Freeport to house those. If you could go on to the next one, please. So where are we focusing? You were saying about what sectors we're looking to focus on. If you draw a line, councillors, in between aerospace and rail and go diagonally up in between low carbon energy and life sciences. So the four on the top, aerospace, automotive, advanced logistics and low carbon energy, they're our top priority sectors to attract into our sites. And our tax site operators, the ones who own our sites, because we don't own the sites, they are bought into this and are working towards attracting those industries with us. The ones on the bottom, rail, food and drink, science and life sciences, are secondary priorities, where the East Midlands is also very strong and has a good pedigree, but they're not ones that we're going to chase. However, we would accept those industries into our sites. So the top priority being the top four, secondary priority at the bottom four, if that sort of answers your question on that sort of side of things. And that supports, as I say, the Freeports, and looking at the industrial strategy, how that's been published recently. That's strengthened the government's commitment to Freeports. There's an action plan that supports that as well. But part of the drive within that is to bring together the investment zones that sit underneath the combined authority and the Freeport under one roof. So as I mentioned before, Leicestershire County Council is our accountable body. The intention is that we would move from being them as our accountable body to the combined authority. So a greater degree of synergy under the two propositions. Because if you're an external investor, you want to invest in the East Midlands. You don't want to get into the weeds of, do I want a Freeport? Do I want a investment zone? You want someone to act as a concierge service to direct you to the right investment for you. So some of that is bringing together the sort of the wiring behind the system for both the investment zones and the Freeport under one roof. And we sit, actually, mentioning it, East Midlands Combined Authority, we sit within their Trent Arc. So the spatial plan that they produced recently, two of our sites sit within that loop. And whilst the Freeport covers Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, it won't escape you that the Combined Authority covers both Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire. So Leicestershire still has to play a role within that, in effect, and they will still be a component member of our board. And clearly there's lots of changes going on in local government through the reorganisation as well, and that may well impact our sort of board makeup in future. Can you just go on to the next slide for me? So I mentioned before about the tax benefits. So there are 4 tax reliefs that we're able to offer prospective businesses coming in. They have to apply for business rates relief. Up until September 2031, a business can apply that comes onto our site for business rates relief. We have to make an assessment and a judgment on that. And part of that is about whether it's additionality, whether it's additional spend, and it's not just displacement from elsewhere. And we govern that process. On top of that, they have a stamp duty exemption. There are enhanced capital allowances, which can be offset on P&L. And there are also national insurance contributions relief for up to 3 years for new jobs up to £25,000 on the site. That's for 3 years. So again, the intention is that you have to be based on the site and you have to be new employees, which again is to ward off people shutting down their shop here and setting up on the Freeport. If you just go on to the next one again, please. The other part of this is customs. Now, on top of, if you imagine there is a dot, and this will become clear on the map that comes up on the next slide. If you imagine a point over East Midlands Airport, there is a 45 kilometre diameter circle that is the customs zone that sits above East Midlands Airport. And any business that is coming into that zone that is new, effectively it's sort of designation, I suppose, but any business that is currently operating there or is new, so it can apply to existing businesses or new businesses coming in, can apply to become a customs site operator. And that would effectively grant them these reliefs. So for example, if you're looking at paying duties when a product comes into or out of the country, currently, if you didn't have any systems in place, you would pay import duties and export duties. If you were an importer and exporter and you applied to become a customs site operator, you would pay duties when it left the country, but you wouldn't pay if you imported it. However, if it enters the UK market, then you would be liable for the import duty. So effectively, it does give a degree of simplification to the duties that people are required to pay and a simplification of the processes. Now, we don't govern that process. We provide the ability for people to do that, but they have to apply to HMRC, and people are still held accountable to HMRC's customs and exercise rules as anywhere else. So they have to fill in all of the paperwork. They have to fill in the details. They probably would have to fill in fewer forms than they would have to do normally, but they are still held to account. If I'm honest, the interest in this has been relatively low. It was a requirement from the government that you had to have a customs site operator in place to even be registered. However, the government in their policy review has waived that requirement because the interest has been extremely low. I think what you would find is that this would work for someone who is familiar with the Freeport model around the world internationally and would expect these things to be in place from their experiences around the world. However, for large importers, exporters, say for example, Rolls-Royce, they will probably have their own purpose-built systems in place with the government already. So the requirement is really not there for them to apply for this. So we've worked with the Chamber of Commerce to publicise this far and wide and to all of that network. And as I say, interest has been extremely low in the take of this. Could you on to the next slide for me, please? So this gives you a context as to where we are. So point 1 on the map is just south of the Toyota plant at Burniston. That is a 170-acre site, I think it is off the top of my head. Then you've got sites in and around East Midlands Airport, which is number 2, and number 3 is Ratcliffe Power Station. The 3 counties are shown on the map there. And as I mentioned, that customs area is the hatched area that sits above the top of it. Now, the customs area also does effectively give the outer boundary of the Freeport, so the area in which that investment can be made. And whilst what I would say is that it does, end at the halfway through Leicestershire, or it cuts off the top of Derbyshire, we will apply those benefits in Derbyshire, Leicestershire, and Nottinghamshire. That's where we consider our theatre of operations to be, so to speak. That's where we're going to focus upon, irrespective of where that line kind of cuts off. So to take you through the sites, if you switch on to the next one for me, please. So this is what's referred to as East Midlands Airport Gateway and Industrial Cluster. To the above the runway, you can see there's 3 sort of red areas. So the maritime rail interchange is at the very top right. The middle structure is Seaver Logistics, and then Maersk is the bottom left. The 2 pieces that are slightly smaller, that are south of the runway, they're on the side of the airport, so within the sort of passport controlled area. So that would suit air freight operators much more. So you've got DHL in that area, you've got the various other air freight operators. So that is run and operated by East Midlands Airport, and they'd have to consider the right people to go in within that. The final site is the site south of that's referred to as eMagic South on this map. That is a third owned by Manchester Airport Group, and they have a planning application going in under consideration by North West Leicestershire at the moment. And then Segro, who are the operators of the gateway to the north of the airport, they've got a development control order. So a DCO, which is an enhanced planning method for the entirety of the site. So there are 2 separate approaches that are being deployed at the moment and are progressing from our board. If you go on to the next slide for me. This is the Toyota site that I referenced. So that large area there is low-grade farmland. It used to be used for Severn Trent previously to store waste from their water treatment facilities. This site is, due to the proximity to Toyota, we are having good conversations with Toyota about if they would like to have part of this site. But part of what our team is working through at the moment is really looking at the business case for this site around what infrastructure is needed to make it work, what the rail connection runs by the side of it, if we were really going to make it work and focus on how we can decarbonise the supply chain and move to rail, then we need to get a rail head off the side of that. So it's very much a work in progress at the moment as to the feasibility of this site. That process will end in March this year, and I should be able March next year, sorry, and I should be able to come back with more details on how that's progressing at that stage. And then the final slide for me, please. So then this is Ratcliffe on Soar, and the colour coding is effective to say that the area in blue is the area which is in the Freeport boundary. So you've got a big chunk of land that sits to the south of the A453 that used to be used by Uniper to bury coal dust. So when they burnt the coal in the power station, they'd put it on that side of the road and then bury it so that it didn't sort of blow away and so forth. That is currently being scraped and moved, and it can be sold for hardcore in road construction or whatever you want to use it for. But clearly this is now ceased operations at the tail end of September last year and is going through a rigorous decommissioning process. The area in yellow is the power station, and because of the decommissioning timescales, that was never intended to be included in the Freeport, because it wouldn't be able to be decommissioned and developed within the time frame that we've got available to us. Because prior to the government extending the timescale, it was originally September 2026 that we needed to get all these sites developed, which would have been a considerable challenge, particularly considering where we are at the moment. So all in, the entire area, including the yellow, is 273 hectares. So it is massive, deceptively so, when you actually see it, because you've got the power station and the massing of the buildings there. But in fact, it's actually 200 hectares is the blue area, which is still enormous in terms of what you're seeking to develop. It's covered by a local development order that was granted by Rushcliffe, and that the approved use for this site was low carbon energy production, manufacturing, and previously was a focus on hydrogen and how that works. But I think some of the timescales potentially around hydrogen, due to the infrastructure needed to be put in place, may be slightly further behind now. It's connected by a railhead that goes in there at the moment. It used to take coal within. It's got water extraction rights. And you might not be able to make this out, but where there's the cooling towers on the left-hand side, just at the bottom of where it sort of sticks out, is going to be retained as national grid infrastructure, which is effectively a huge interchange that can be connected for power. Because of all these things that are in play on this site, it is incredibly attractive to investors. It's got the ability to have vast amounts of power transferred through the site. Water extraction means that potentially something like hydrogen could work in the future, or data centers that require water for cooling. The size and scale of it, the connectivity, and also the proximity to East Midlands Airport means that from our discussions that we've had for the Office for Investment, they're a part of the Department for Business and Trade. It's one of their top 3 sites in the country previously for a gigafactory for the lower half of the site, but also for advanced manufacturing at all. And out of the inquiries that we get through the Freeport, this is the one that people are drawn to far more than any of the others, because it's got planning in place, and because of the infrastructure that I mentioned before, it's stand out the one that is the sort of jewel in the crown so far. As others get through their planning processes, I've no doubt that they will catch up in terms of their interest. But as it stands at the moment, this is the one that we're getting the most interest on. In terms of if you can switch on to the next slide for me. So in 2023, the LDO was adopted. The decommissioning of the power station, so the bit in yellow, will run from this year up to 2030. And the review of the LDO itself is next year. And that will be for yourself as councillors, or those who sit on the planning committee, to review that LDO and define what that means going forwards. The actual site itself, as part of the LDO, also had a transport cap put on it. And I'll come on to what we're doing to address that, because clearly Junction 24 and the surrounding transport infrastructure that feeds into that is going to be put under pressure by the 2 Freeport sites that sit very close to this. And it's something that we recognise and really need to address. There's also planning permission from the county for an energy from waste site, which would provide power generation on the site and that is safeguarded until next year. And I understand that they're working with investors at the moment. I know there was media coverage of it previously, that the previous investor pulled out, but they're also looking at alternatives at the moment and having positive discussions in that space. You can go on to the next slide for me, please. So as I mentioned, you've got two of our sites sit effectively astride junction 24, and it's junction 24 is a very, very complicated junction in terms of the projected capacity. Is expected to go up by at least 51% naturally by, I think, 2040, I think off the top of my head. So that's just natural growth affecting this. There are not just developments at the Freeport nearby this, there are lots of different developments in and around the area. So Harworth are working in the bottom left for a 4,000 home development. There are different developments in and off the A50 that they're looking to develop. So clearly we need to find a solution to this to enable development to actually take place. And we're working with National Highways, the local highways authorities in the first instance, to look at this junction to ensure that we've got the modelling in place that is needed to make a considered decision as to whether any potential scheme that is brought forward actually is fit for purpose, because currently that's not in place. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of jiggery pokery that takes place to actually ensure that all of the highways authorities agree on the best approach to actually take, and that they all agree that they move forward in the same direction. So we're having those meetings. We're having those meetings with MCA as well, and that's the first stage to actually bring that together and look at what potentially is needed in terms of and how far, I suppose, the scope of the impact on this junction needs to be taken into effect, because it is extremely wide ranging, and it is not just a case of we'll put another arm in the junction and that's it solved. You need to have a really comprehensive solution to look at this. If you can flip on to the next slide for me, I think I've probably just taken you through that one as well. So if you flip on to the next one, please. So our roles, or certainly our projects that we're looking to deliver at the moment, are very much focused on getting our sites ready and enabling those sites. We're now coming on for over 2 years, and we want to see progress move forward, but they are extremely complicated sites, even working through grid connections, making sure that we've got the interest from central government, from regional government to back the schemes. You might need financial input to build the infrastructure to get them online. It is extremely complicated to get it together, and we are a small but nimble organisation. There's 14 of us coming from various different backgrounds with broad capabilities on programme management, commercial side. So we've got some who used to work on High Speed 2 and vast infrastructure projects to help us get this off the ground. We're also clear about the remit of what we're here to do, and we need the help of regional partners as well as local authorities such as yourselves to understand what it is we're seeking to achieve, and then help us to unlock some of the blocks that we might come up against. So if you can go on to the next slide for me, please. So I referenced before on the slide of eMagic, the slide that covers East Midlands Airport, that we have three buildings or three occupiers that are already in place, and that's attracted £150 million of investment into those sites, with Mersth, Seaver and Maritime Transport all choosing to locate or expand their operations there. In the case of Maritime, that you can see, everything on the right of that picture is the expansion of their rail terminal, so that's a £20 million investment that they made into their site. Over the last 12 months, we've also created 30 apprentices in advanced logistics and generated over 800 jobs to date across those sites. That clearly is not 28,000 jobs, but it is steps forward that we need to take. We need to ensure that we've got all of the infrastructure in place, the planning in place on the sites, the grid connections that we need, and so there is a phased approach. Largely, we've mapped the risk profile of how these sites would be developed and what the risks are, and those that have got planning, like Rushcliffe, have obviously got a lower risk because they've already got over some of those hurdles. But some like EMIP, the site by Toyota, have got a longer way to go before we get to that stage. So we've worked hard to ensure that our sites and our key partners work together. So for Ratcliffe itself, you've got Uniper, MCA, Rushcliffe Borough Council, the local universities and colleges, and also the government working in lockstep to ensure that we get this site unlocked and the jobs delivered. Some of that has meant aligning the Freeport's development with MCA's vision, so the spatial plan that they created, and the Trent arc that I mentioned, ensuring that we're forefront in that, and that they understand the importance of these sites, and that we've also got the skills provision that if we want the workers into these sites, that they're transferring from high carbon industries, that they've got the skills providers to be able to train them and an end industry to actually go into. So to give you some examples of what we can do, the building that you see on the right hand side of here is the East Midlands Zero Carbon Innovation Centre. It was launched this year in collaboration with the University of Nottingham and Loughborough University, and it's a hub for research and development. As I mentioned before, it's looking at propulsion technologies for the future and how that they can put in place the necessary requirements to take something from concept all the way up to scalable delivery. Another partnership that we've funded is also the Future Energy Skills Hub, and that's working with the Institute of Technology and their Derby campus and also Loughborough College, and then going to be launching courses in September that look at that future energy skills and what is required, so that you have level 3 to 5 courses which develop skilled technicians that will be the engineers and technicians of the future. If you can flip onto the next slide for me, please. So this really is a once in a generation opportunity for us in the East Midlands. It is huge amounts of investment that we're seeking to bring in. I know it clearly sounds like an enormous amount of hype, and you need to see delivery of these things. You need to see boots, spades in the ground. You need to see jobs created. You need to see development to believe, obviously, what the projections are. I'm saying, but the opportunities, it really is here to drive this forward. We're committed to creating the skills for your residents. We're here to create the jobs for them. We're here to future-proof our industries that, as I mentioned, were previously very carbon intensive and move to cleaner alternatives. And through our soon-to-be launching skills delivery plan, locally elected representatives will have an ability to have greater control over some of over that funding that I mentioned before, as to how that you can tactically deploy it to say, we've got an issue in our borough or our district, and we would like that funding to be able to help you there. We're also committed to working with local communities around our sites through either newsletters, online updates, councillor forums. So we're part of the Rushcliffe Parish Forum. There's a similar one over for eMagic and also for our EMIP sites as well, and also our local MPs. So I suppose in closing, really, and I know there's a few questions and queries that Chair you and Vice Chair you sent before as well. And I'll cover those off just as a final bit before I open up the questions. But it really is an enormously important site, this Ratcliffe site, and ensuring that we've got the right promotion of this site, that we've got all the necessary pieces in place to get this off the ground. It is a massive opportunity, and I'm sure you all realise that the opportunity that it presents to the borough or to the district. Sorry. You asked a question prior to this meeting around business interest in market conditions as well. So we are attracting investment. There's over 30 live queries that we've got on this site at the moment, and that ranges from some that are quite small and perhaps not what our landowners would be looking to extremely large scale sites and large scale propositions. I can't go into too much of the details because of commercial confidentialities, but they are predominantly energy, advanced manufacturing and technology in terms of their backgrounds. So data centers, for example, are some of the interests that we've had. The current market, it is extremely tough. The international headwinds, tariffs and so forth make investment decisions for investors very tricky. However, we've just completed a piece of work that looks at, I showed you the sectors that we're seeking to target, but then it goes into a huge amount of detail in terms of where in the world are those investors actually based? So who has got money to actually invest? Who has got the ability? Who has got the synergies with our supply chain or an existing interest here? And part that is to make sure that we speak to both our colleagues within the Department for Business and Trade, the embassies that are based within those countries, and those countries that are top of the list at the moment are the US and Germany in terms of our particular sector-specific interest. Our research that we've done off the back of it then breaks that down further into where city industrial clusters and the companies that we'll be looking to reach out to, and that marketing activity will ramp up in the second half of this year. The government recognition of the site by the Office for Investment and locally by the Mayor is a significant boost to the Ratcliffe site. It's raised our profile among institutional investors, and this site is very much at the forefront of sites that they tout to investors seeking to come in. There's also, I think, some questions about what's being preserved on the site in terms of woodland. A significant proportion of the woodland that is on site is actually located outside of the developable area, and so not directly affected by the future development. There is still woodland on those sites, but for the remaining areas, there are biodiversity net gain requirements that are captured within the LDO that Uniper will be required to support and provide or retain habitats and mitigate or offset any adverse areas. The detail of that as to what's enhanced or proposed is really dependent on what's brought forward in terms of development onto the site.
I think Councillor Brown would like to ask a question, and Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm quite familiar with this site. I sit on EMAC at East Midlands Airport, so I've been through these slides before. At no time have you mentioned the impact it's going to have on the local community. This site I represent both as a borough and also on the county. You may not be aware at the moment that there is no public transport to that site, and this has been an argument of mine for a long time. All the new development we've seen at the airport, around the airport with the gateway and everything else, all the jobs promised, nobody in South Rushcliffe can access those jobs unless they've got their own vehicle. You mentioned Junction 24. I've been involved in conversations at EMAC with Junction 24. Surely you should be looking at sustainable transport, getting vehicles off the road rather than looking how we can stop the traffic jams. And that's where local transport comes in. At no point can any, you mentioned apprenticeships and retraining. To go from East Leek, for example, to that site via Loughborough, it takes 2 hours and it's 3.5 miles away. It's a joke. So my question to you is, I've got 2 questions. What are you planning on local transport links? And also, what is advanced logistics? Logistics in my book is moving stuff around, but what is advanced logistics?
Okay, now it's fair point to raise in terms of connectivity, because it's important that we actually have that you have to have the bus routes in place. Certainly with East Midlands Gateway, I know that there's an electric shuttle bus that they have connected into local areas, and East Midlands Airport. East Midlands Airport, I was going to say, has connected to the west, where there's much more of well, I say much more. There is also a dearth in sort of local transport in that side. For our sites, as you say, we need to ensure that we've got public transport. Now, I know Uniper had looked at safeguarding some of the route that would potentially connect the tram from Clifton all the way down to it. Whether that actually comes to pass, because that's going to cost an absolute fortune to sort of deliver. However, we're working, as I say, closely with MCA, that is going to be the transportation authority, and how that moves across. And some of that is looking at bus routes, how we ensure that we have people connected. There's no way that we can actually get workers to these sites who are the age range, the demographic that we need, because I can sit here and say, well, we want to create high quality jobs. Now, to some people that might be, oh, well, it's all just graduates going to be there, but we actually need to have highly skilled people, and we need to have a range of people working in these sites, and not everybody is going to have a car or have that to rely on. So we need to have a range of transport so that goes on there. They are looking as well at how they would connect East Midlands Parkway into the site, but by the same token,
There's still no public transport to the Parkway site either.
Yeah. I mean, much the same. I live in Loughborough, and the Parkway is a bit of a kind of yeah. And it's also quite expensive if you're wanting to sort of travel there, and quite limited in terms of the area. So it is something that we are considering in terms of the wider scale as to how we actually get the workforce into these sites.
It's not just getting the workforce there, it's getting people off the roads, because the local villages already are using rat runs. And these are the conversations we're having in various places. How we're going to prevent that? Because people will naturally take the shortest route to work. But if we can get them on public transport with the help of the Freeport, it'd be a great help.
Yeah, no, completely take that on board.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. First question is about who is it the government who would make a decision about extending the deadline for the tax incentives?
Yes.
It would be the Treasury, and were they responsible for moving it from 2026 to 2031?
Yes, so they're the ones who set the original deadline. So effectively, the Managed Treasury is in charge of the tax release and how the timescales work, and it needs to have legislation be put through Parliament to change or amend those, and that's what happened at to extend it from 2026 to 2031. So if they were going to do it again, it would need to be the government who takes that decision and then amends the legislation to do it again.
So if a business was interested and landed with us in 2030, does it run out in 31, or do they have 3 years from 2030?
That, I mean, I suppose it would probably be decided upon by a case-by-case basis at the time. I think if we had significant investor interest to come into that site, we'd need to be making, I suspect what would happen, I mean, I can't say it's certain, but I suspect we would need to put forward a business case to government to outline what the opportunity was that was being put forward, what the benefits would be, and then they'd have to make a decision on that. But until we get to that stage, I wouldn't know. I suspect if we're in a place where our sites are close to or about to be filled up, and we really need to extend these deadlines, I imagine we'll be making representations in a similar sort of way. But currently, as it stands, 2031, September 2031 is what we're working to, and we're focused on that.
One more question for me. You mentioned about deprived communities attracting. Will you be coordinating skills training with those deprived communities, and which deprived communities are we talking about?
The skills plan that we're working with at the moment works with local authorities across the East Midlands, different so the partners within the Freeport, but wider than that as well. And I don't know the specifics of each of the communities that we're working with, but I can go back and find that out, and I can report back. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Where are we comparatively when measured against the other Freeports that got the designations at the same time as us?
Okay. The earliest Freeport getting designation was Teesside, so they were slightly before the rest. And then it was the first 8 Freeports were signed off. So all of the English ones, the Scottish ones followed along second, and the Welsh ones, some of them still aren't signed off in terms of their financial business cases. Of the rest of the Freeports, we're sort of middle of the pack, I would say. We benefited from having a much from having a fuller team, I suppose, to support us. Some of the Freeports were set up and then didn't actually have a funding besides the chief exec or additional support provided by local authorities. So we actually had a dedicated team and are probably much further along in terms of some aspects than others. It also depends on the sort of situation. So we're the only inland Freeport compared to the Freeports on the coast, and they each have got different sectors that they're focusing on. So we're broadly similar to those who were created at the same time, as opposed to Teesside that was that much further along in terms of where it was set up.
That's interesting. Thank you. I think I was, at one of the forums that you mentioned the other day, and you know, I hear what Councillor Brown is saying about his concerns. You know, my concerns are about getting the jobs there that would cause the people the need to actually get transport to the site. And you know, my fear is that you know, we don't seem to have any kind of specific momentum or the sense of real progress. You know, it seems that at every turn there's a new kink in the delivery model or what's needed. And you know, my mind also turns to what's the purpose of what we're doing here this evening, other than it's nice to talk about it. You know, what are we proposing that we're going to do? You know, and it strikes me that it's not clear to me where the leadership's coming from.
In what respect?
Of driving the pulling everything together and towards getting the spades in the ground and the people working. You know, we have got a mayor, but she isn't particularly visible to me at the moment. You know, we've obviously got new county councils, and I think what would be a small action that we could take, you know, is to call for some leadership here to get these things moving and get these things done. We keep hearing there's electrical infrastructure headaches to get over. You know, we keep hearing that Junction 24 is a problem, which we knew because that's why the caps were there on the LDO, but we're nowhere near the caps because the total amount of jobs on the LDO site at the moment is 0. And the south side is a developable piece of land. So, you know, my welcome to come back, but you know, my suggestion would be that we you know, contact some of our local leaders like the mayor and the MP, you know, and ask them to provide some leadership in this area because we want to see delivery.
Completely take on your points, councillor. You know, it's valid. You want to see progress. It's been, as you said in the parish forum, it's been 2 years since the LDO was passed, and clearly you want to see progress on this site due to the opportunity that it presents. I mean, the Uniper as a power station would have generated income for you for business rates, and you need to see that, you know, filled, and the opportunity as to how that's developed in future. You are right. It is an extremely complicated site. From the modelling that we did from the transport cap, you know, that is probably going to mean that about 20% of the site is actually able to be delivered before we hit up against that. So we need to look at that as a solution. And I completely take your point that we need to have public transport alternatives. There also does need to be, that can't be in isolation. It does need to look at a whole range of issues, but we also need to look at the transport cap and alleviating that. I know it might sound quite daft that grid connections are an issue for a power station, but the national grid, the way that they've signed things off, has been absolutely inundated. Plus, they have gone through and reviewed that, and they've looked at sites that no longer we're going to be progressing within a certain time frame, and just gets them off the bottom of the list. However, there are complications around that. Now, the good thing that I can say is when you're talking about local leadership across the region, the mayor is extremely bought into this, and we're supported by her team and working really closely across the board on that.
First of all, the Mayor Clare, as she's known, I've written to the mayor through county council, through officers at county council a month ago, asking her for a meeting to release some funds for public transport. She hasn't answered, so she doesn't seem that interested. Although she is attending a meeting at the airport that I'm going to in September with EMCA to talk about Freeport, so I'll be challenging her then. But she is fully aware of the situation, but she's not doing anything about it.
If I might say, I'm slightly underwhelmed by what I've seen. I was hoping to see something more positive. What I feel I've seen is a sales brochure with the right boxes ticked. But I don't feel I can see any progress. It doesn't seem to me that we are talking about anything different to when we did the site visit before it actually stopped working at Ruckliffe-on-Soar. So I have to say I am somewhat underwhelmed, and I agree with what Councillor Walker's saying. Yeah, we need to be driving this. This needs to be a flagship. We need to be doing something very positive. This country needs it at the moment. So that would be my message. I think Councillor Way wants to say something. Councillor Chaplin. Oh, Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Chaplin.
Well, actually, Councillor Walker covered a bit of what I was going to say. I mean, I can see that you can't give us a date, but when might we be looking at some sort of movement of something happening on that site? Because that's what people ask me all the time. You know, it seems to have been a long time and nothing's happened. Is it going to be another 6 months, another year, another 2 years? What are we looking at?
I can't give you surety on that in terms of timescales and deadlines as to when we get the commercial agreements in place of capitalising on the leads that we've got. I can only say that I completely understand that you want to see the progress on this site, and we are working extremely hard to capitalise on the interest that there is there to make this opportunity a success. But I can't say it's going to be October this year or October next year. I'm not in a position to be able to guarantee that or make those claims at this stage.
Can I ask, can we, presumably a report will be going to Cabinet following this, can we ask that they, contact the mayor and say, we really need some action here? So I think something out of this scrutiny meeting needs to go forward, and we need to be saying something.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we can certainly write to the mayor and the MP raising it, but as Dan said, it's already very much on their agenda. So I guess we can think about, I don't mean necessarily this evening, but we can think about what we want to say and what message we want to get across to try and elevate it as part of that. I think one of the things I would say, the reason we wanted the Freeport to come to scrutiny this evening is because I'm aware that some of you around this table have heard updates from Freeport previously, but not all councillors have. And one of the things we talked about was whether we have an all councillors update as well about the Freeport, because I think it's important as a key development site in the borough. You know, it's a huge opportunity, as Dan's outlined, that all members kind of have an understanding of the site and what the plans are. And I appreciate frustrations around progress, but it is a very complex site. And I think in terms of leadership, there is a Ruckliffe-on-Soar forum which brings together key partners to try and progress the site. So that's something that Adam, our chief exec, chairs. So the kind of Freeport, Combined Authority, Uniper are all sitting around the table and trying to move things forward. So things are happening behind the scenes, but there's a lot of kind of barriers to get over and things.
Yes, I hear what you say about it going to all councillors, and I think that is important that it does go to all councillors. Otherwise, we're sort of it becomes almost talking behind closed doors, and that's not right. It should go to all councillors, and all councillors should have some input. I think we've got more questions, so I'll go to Councillor Ellis.
Oh, don't know what I did there. Yes, I'm not sure that the mayor and our MP are the right people to drive this. If it were a private company, there would be a chairman, a chief executive, and a board of directors. And it's the chair and the chief executive who are the drivers. There doesn't seem to be that kind of structure in this setup.
In terms of the Freeport, yeah. So we I suppose it's an interesting relationship as to how it works. So the Freeport itself has got its board, its chair, its chief exec, etc. But each of the individual projects are sort of driven to a certain degree in collaboration between the Freeport and the landowners. Now the landowners it's their site, and it's their decisions as to how to move that forward commercially in the timeframes that are workable for them. We influence, we can't dictate to them when they sort of pull that forward from the Freeport, but clearly we're here to help them, assist them, work with them, and bring together partners to overcome any obstacles that they're finding in their sort of program of delivery, etc. In terms of actually having a specific project board, there's a team at Uniper that lead on the decommissioning and redevelopment of that site. And you will end up with a similar sort of setup for both eMagic and also for EMIP as well. There is a team for that, but it's not to the level of, say, the chief exec and the chair specifically sit on the redevelopment plans. It's a smaller site-based team that lead on that. If that helps, just sort of outline it.
Yeah, I certainly understand how a project as big and complex as this isn't just going to take off. It needs a lot of work, and the early work will hopefully generate later success. But the chair's right, you're not really showing much progress so far. How can we address that issue?
I mean, the only way, I suppose, the proof being in the pudding is to show you the development sort of taking place on the site. But I can't really give you the necessary timescales to say it's going to be this moment in time, and you can definitely see that X or Y is going to happen on the site, which is really going to show you that we're committed to moving it forward. Uniper are not dormant. They're working through their decommissioning progress. There's an enormous amount that needs to take place on site to be able to make sure that it's ready to actually have the developers come in and working across an array of different things that they've got statutory deadlines that they need to work through on their decommissioning front. That's not to say that their eye is off the ball in terms of what they need to do to develop this site. They're working hard to work through that. They ensure that they've got all the necessary conditions in there. And there are a myriad of things that they need to address. But I completely take on board on what you're saying, is that you want to see this site developed and you want to see it move forward. And you're only really going to be convinced that what I've taken you through tonight is actually going to be translated in something tangible when you're getting development onto that site. But unfortunately, at this moment in time, I'm unable to give you the sort of surety of it's going to be this moment in time at present. We are working towards that. I'm confident that we will make a success of this site, but clearly the progress, I'm not able to show you the level of progress at this moment in time.
Yeah, we've talked here about getting the mayor and the MP involved, but as an organisation, as Borough Council, we do have representation. Councillor Brown has talked about being able to make an influence through the East Midlands Airport Board, isn't it? And said you'll have a word with the mayor, which is good on the local transport issue anyway. But we do have the leader, don't we, who is involved in the on a board, is that what it's called? And I think you mentioned the chief executive. I don't know, there's an executive group then, is there?
Yeah, so
that we as a scrutiny group should be saying to them initially, come on, do something.
Couldn't agree more. And that, I think, is going to be the message that we're going to be sending back. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. You talk about junction 24, but I'm not quite sure how you can even think about that because we don't know what we're going to get. So we've got to get an idea of what comes next, what's the plan for after that, and when these things maybe could happen. Also, into the whole plot of everything going off, we have local government reorganisation. So by then, you know, the land will be very different with the local government maybe. I just find that there's no, this will happen, and then this will happen. I can see it that it's very difficult, but I think I could appreciate it better if there was something down that said, well, we're waiting for this to happen and then that can happen, you know. And they've only just done the junction 24 and changed it all, and with the airport, so I'm not quite sure how that will work out, but good luck with that. So yes, I think somebody needs bomb putting underneath them, but perhaps it's not that easy and I'm looking at it too simplistically. But I would like to think that something could be done, if only to say this has to happen before this and this has to happen after that. That would be helpful for us, even if we haven't got exact date, but just some idea of what is happening. Because for me, it's all, yes, this is here and this is there, and but there's nothing sort of concrete to say how it will be done or how anything will be done and in what order.
Yes, there's nothing tangible, what you're saying. I mean, because I'm looking here, next steps, develop single delivery plan underpinning by agreed traffic modelling. Who's doing that?
we're doing that.
Who's paying for it?
So
And does that include the transport that's been mentioned over here from the
yeah, so
villages?
the Freeport is driving forward that piece of work. We've been asked to do that on behalf of the highways authorities, but working with the highways authorities, and that looks at, let's say, the entire infrastructure that sits around junction 24. I appreciate there's been roadworks on junction 24 for about the last 10 to 15 years, or it feels like, but this is looking at not just the junction itself, but the spokes and the arms and the infrastructure that goes off north and south of that junction, east and west. That traffic modelling is to effectively create a model that is endorsed by the highways authorities, that is also endorsed by national highways, so that schemes that potentially that they would consider would be a solution to that junction long term, they would favour having something that is a much more comprehensive solution than just piecemeal adjustments to the junction itself. However, to get to that stage, to even have anything that would be proposed to say this is a solution to that junction, you have to have the modelling in place first, and then you need to develop the actual solutions that would be brought forward, so that you've got something to actually assess it against. And then we also need to look at the funding models that would actually support this. And it is extremely large amounts of money, and it is extremely complicated to pull together. But that's what we're working towards.
Because you put it here as next steps, but that's next steps. Is that this year, next year, sometime? It's very woolly.
Well, if it's helpful, Chair and members of the committee, I can come back with a more defined timescale and timeline for Junction 24 and the work that we're doing on that, and also speak to the landowners, Uniper, and bring a sort of a more detailed timeline in terms of what their application, what they're doing in terms of decommissioning, and when they're looking at an actual site occupation, etc. So that you've got
When
the
could you do
timescales.
that?
I will action that after I leave this meeting.
Should we be diarying that?
You mean for future scrutiny?
Hmm.
I mean, if that's what, if we wanted to come back, yes.
What does everyone feel about that? Would you be in favour?
Yes.
I think, okay, we've raised some more questions. Hang on, I think.
It's just
For them.
just a quick one about the traffic plan, whatever you want to call it. Lots of experts all putting their pennyworth in. Are you involving local knowledge into that? And if so, who are you using? Only 2 weeks ago, I was stuck at 24 for an hour and a half because the lorry had broken down. And when I eventually got off 24, the whole of the road network round Ratcliffe on Soar, Westleek, Eastleek, St Bonington, it was chocolate. Nobody was moving anywhere. And that was just for the lorries broken down. But what I'm saying is, are you using local knowledge for this, or is it just experts from all around the country that don't know the local network?
I can come back as to what the methodology is, to how we're approaching that, and how they're approaching that modelling, so that it takes that into account, and you can ask the questions on that side. I don't have that knowledge in terms of how they're approaching it from our commercial team, I'm afraid, at this stage, but I can come back with that.
I'll give you another example. Next year, we've got a bridge closure. The A6006 is closing for the a bridge to be raised to allow for electrification. Even though it's been cancelled, they're still going ahead with the bridge work. Together with Leicestershire County Council, Nottinghamshire County Council, Rushcliffe Borough, Charnwood Borough, and village chairs from all around the area, we're working on a local transport plan together with Network Rail. Surely that's what you should be doing.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor. We need to get local knowledge into it. Much the same as you, I left the site last week, and there was gridlock all the way around that, and had to use the rat runs to leave it. So I take on board. We need to take all views into it, and that's why we're trying to find a solution to it.
I'll wait for the consultation.
I'm not sure what's happening here, whether it's Councillor Walker or Councillor Mason.
We've reached an agreement, haven't we, Councillor Mason?
Oh, good. Oh,
We-
wonderful.
Look, I think with respect to Mr. Cooper coming back, or when, or what have you, I mean, from my perspective, that highlights the key problem here. The absolute last thing that Mr. Cooper needs to be doing is coming back to another talking shop. He's got 400 other ones to go to. Okay, and we wonder why we're not getting, perhaps, I'll try and be more diplomatic with my language, and we wonder why we're not seeing the progress that we would feel that we want to, and perhaps it feels a bit adversarial this evening, but that I think I know that it's not. It's really allyship, you know, with an understanding and a frustration that neither the 15 or so people sat in this room, or probably the 44 other colleagues, can really do much. And I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but you know, it's precisely because it is complex, you know, that we need strong, singular leadership to bang the doors down that need banging down, whether that's at National Grid or at National Highways or wherever it is. We need someone with enough clout to get those doors down. So, you know, I'll reiterate that point. My 2 pence would be that we don't need to be really, but nobody will be benefiting much from Mr. Cooper coming back to tell us what he's up to. But I respect that other people would be. Last point, if we look across the road at Fareham, that was heading in the same direction. What ultimately ended up unlocking it? Homes England putting a load of cash in to get the infrastructure in, because the private sector on its own was going okay, but that is what it needed to unlock it, and that's what we need. That's the kind of thing that we need here, and that's the kind of thing that I think we should be suggesting happens.
Are you thinking that what we would need is a strong, well-heeled employer who says, we're going with the site, and that would then drive others to come? Because when you're saying you've got so many live possibilities, but I mean, how concrete are they? How big are they?
Yeah, as with any of these sites, getting an anchor client in gives you the focus as to where you're looking to build a cluster around that. So say, for example, if we were looking at doing an automotive cluster around the site that's closest to Toyota, it should probably come as no surprise that we're trying to encourage Toyota to be that anchor client, and then we can look at what supply chain they would potentially need to fit in there. In similar respects, we're going through the same process with the sites in and around East Midlands Airport. And then recently, say, for example, with Ratcliffe, we've been working with the Combined Authority, with Uniper as well, around what could AI growth zones potentially work on the site. And all of this is effectively trying to make sure that we've got the necessary ingredients in place to attract the right people in there, because ultimately that is what going to make this site work. But we need to make sure that we're working in concert with our landowners and ensuring that they're ready to have the people come in. Because if I do my job and I serve them up with lots and lots of inbound queries and they're not ready to receive them, or they're not the right types, then it's not going to be a particularly productive approach. So that is effectively what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that this site is marketed to the right people, that we're getting the right clients in that are the right size and scale, so that it's not in effect small minnows that potentially wouldn't be of interest to the landowners. The interest that we've been getting at the moment is credible. It is sites that there are people who would be interested. Uniper are having conversations with some of those, but as I say, unfortunately, I can't go into the sort of specifics of that at this time.
Right, anybody else have any? Oh, sorry, Councillor Mason, I thought you'd reached an agreement.
It was just to say, thank you for that. I don't need details of anything. It's just a broad roadmap of where you're going, really, and with it, and some of it you've just said as well, that has made it easier for us to understand what exactly is happening. Because at the moment, if you look at the site, nothing's happening much. But we just want you, well, I do, to just explain a little bit, which you've done, what exactly is happening, and that something, and reassure us that something's happening. So anyway, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
What would happen if North West Leicestershire turned down the application because there's a hell of a lot of strong objections to that site on the southern side of the airfield? How would the Freeport, obviously you'd appeal, but what if you lost the appeal as well, then what?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, we don't own the site, so the responsibility for progressing the planning application, so as in the case for the LDO here, was progressed by Uniper. The one is the planning application for that's in at the moment. It's been put forward by Manchester Airport Group and Prologis. No, not in the LDO. No, the one that's in by the airport. Yeah. So that the timescales for that, they've got to work through that process. If they were to turn it down, then I suspect that they would want to appeal, which is open to them, and then it would go forward to the planning inspectorate. I can't second guess where that would kind of go at this stage, but that's the process that they would kind of follow. And then with Segro, they're looking at a separate process through the development control order, and again that similar-ish, but it works at more kind of national scale, and the process is working through at the moment. To your point, there is a lot of interest in that site, and a fair amount of public responses in terms of it as to whether it's what they think about it. There's been a lot of representations on that site, so we'll just have to wait and see in terms of what happens and make a decision on that at the time. But it's not for we would support our members putting things forward, but we're not in control of the planning side of it. That's theirs to sort of move forward.
My question was though, what would happen with the Freeport if it failed?
Yeah, well, ultimately with any of these sites, so if there are large delays at Ratcliffe, if there are large delays at EMIP, that £1 billion that is available for that we would generate, if we don't generate the necessary development on those sites, then that pot of money gets smaller and smaller and shrinks. If EMIP, if the eMagic site, the one where the planning application is in, doesn't get off the ground and is not successful, then ultimately that is not available to the Freeport and to be reinvested across the East Midlands, and we would need to remodel that and decide how to move that forwards off the back of it. But yeah, that is the real implications. Much the same for Ratcliffe as well. There's income to you as a council, but there's also income to the Freeport and investment that would be lost through that not being developed.
And finally, you never told me what advanced logistics were.
Oh, advanced logistics. So I'll send you a fuller guide and take you through it all now. I'll send you a fuller guide that will take you through rather than take you through the whole thing now. But it's using more sort of automated processes as well as what you consider the sort of standard processes. Yeah.
Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at your context and your next steps, so you mentioned twice HS2. Now HS2, as far as I can see, flips and flops almost on a weekly basis as to where it's going and if it's going anywhere. So can you explain why you've got this thing about HS2 safeguarding?
So part of the route of what was HS2 was safeguarded, so you can sort of develop on it, and it was part of that path where that would have gone runs up alongside junction 24. So if we were looking at solutions that would potentially take place around that, we would need to remove those safeguards so that we'd be able to potentially use that land to enhance the roundabout as it stands. With those ring fences in place, we're not able to do anything with it. So we need to speak to the Department for Transport, and have been speaking to them. They've put off making a decision on that on a number of occasions. As you say, HS2 currently appears to be paused. There's been sort of talk and rumours about whether there's going to be some sort of high-speed 2 light that sort of takes its place, whether they resurrect one of the arms, but I don't have any clear details as to what that is. But currently they're effectively sitting on those safeguarded routes, and we're asking the question as to whether we can get that removed to potentially look at how we would incorporate that into any improvements that would be proposed around that junction.
So is that actually something that's in the way of you progressing things?
Yes.
Interesting. Right. I think that's it. I think I'd just like to second what Councillor Brown has said. I'm coming from the same area as the borough as him. There's a lot of concern about traffic that it'll generate, and most of the transport issues are addressing the strategic routes, so the main routes. And at some point, I think the local villages would like to know what you're going to do to help prevent rat runs and heavy traffic going through small villages.
And there's a piece of work that we've commissioned at the moment, not only looking at the traffic modelling, but also looking at the wider strategic infrastructure that exists, travel patterns that take place, and some of that looks at that modelling, at the different transportation methods that are around. That is, I'll need to come back with you with the details of that report for when that's going to come out, but that is not too far off actually being ready to be shared with you. So it'd be good to get your input into that.
Anybody else? No? Well, I think we've given that, sorry, we've been given you a bit of a grilling, I think.
It's quite all right. It's more than anything else. It's actually it's good that you're passionate about this, that it shows that you actually care and you've got a stake and you're interested in it. Whilst I would much rather you ask exacting questions and get the answers that you want than just be quite passive on it. So it's still very much a worthwhile experience for me to kind of go through this and find out what you as councillors are interested, and so that you've got that dialogue with us at the Freeport to hold our feet to the fire and move us forward.
I'm wondering, because we have quite a distance between our scrutiny meetings, would you be able to provide us, you mentioned timeline, would you be able to provide us with some documentation which shows us the timeline?
Yeah, that should be fine.
That gives a little bit more meat on the bone?
It's not a problem. It will probably come from one of my colleagues because I leave for France tomorrow, but I will send a message after this to make sure that it is actioned and sent across to you. And it's probably not going to be the best person to send it to you, Kath, is it? When is it you finish?
And I think we as a group need to be addressing Cabinet about this and saying, reporting back to them what our feelings are and what we feel needs doing. That I don't feel as though the engine's running yet, and that's what we need, and we need the engine driver. Can you put your microphone on?
At the airport, I'm the representative from this area, Nottinghamshire, but we have representatives from Leicestershire, South Staffordshire and Derbyshire, and we're all singing off the same hymn sheet about this. It's all about the infrastructure that's not in place and what's going to happen with the traffic and everything else, local transport. So it's not just this Rushcliffe, it's the other areas surrounding, and even Charnwood, who got a place on there as well. We're all saying the same things, just to let you know that. It's not just us that's been awkward.
Yes, as you say, infrastructure every time.
Which is the main thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure we've actually reached any conclusion other than that we haven't reached any conclusion. And it says in our recommendation is that Growth and Development Scrutiny Group members consider the update provided by EMF at the committee meeting and identify further opportunities to be explored. Well, we want the whole matter explored, and I would welcome the opportunity of being able to speak to Cabinet and telling them just exactly how we feel about this.
Do you mean via a Cabinet report? Is that?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, that's something I think.
But I also think we ought to be communicating with our other councillors. They ought to be aware of where we're at. They ought to be aware of this meeting that we've had and of the presentation that we've had. Councillor Ellis.
I think that the first step, Chair, is to get that timeline, whatever form that's in, because until we get that, we're just blind. We can't monitor anything because there's nothing to monitor. So if that could be a priority, please, And then once we've got it, the committee doesn't necessarily have to convene, but we can all look at it and form some kind of plan.
The engine's not started yet. Sorry, I should have said that. The engine's not started yet, and we've got to get it started. I don't know what else I can say or how I can crack the whip any harder, but that's obviously how we all feel, and we need to pass that back to Cabinet and Council. Okay, thank you, Dan. I'm sorry it was hard, but that's what it's about, and we'll no doubt see you again, because I think once we've had some more information, we should be actually setting a date for further scrutiny.
Further scrutiny or the all councillors update that we talked about, because perhaps that's forum for it.
Well, yes, we want a councillor's update, but depending on what is on that update, we need further scrutiny, do we not? As things progress, we need to continue to keep scrutinising this. We can't just leave it. We've got to have it back, because otherwise it's going to fall by the wayside.
Yeah, I think once we've got the timeline, we can have a further
Exactly.
conversation about when might be suitable for.
Right. Thank you, Dan. You're free to go. We have just a little bit more to do before we finish. And I'm sure you don't want to be here with us. Right. What I wanted to say was our next item is the work programme, and there is nothing on the work programme at the moment. I have a couple of issues that when we receive the minutes, the work programme diary should appear on the minutes, and so that we can see that there is nothing on it, and that people, I say people, the councillors will look at that hopefully, and we need to put something forward, and it would be an encouragement.
I think we should put the subject one just discuss back on it.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. It's got to go back on. Yes. Sorry, Rex. But the other thing I want to say is, as I was chairman of COG, we decided that matrix was a bit of a highfalutin term that people were totally flummoxed by, and that we should revert, or we should call it a scrutiny request. And yet I read through paperwork for this meeting and I thought, if I see matrix again, I'll scream. So can we please remember that we don't use that word matrix, because many councillors think, oh gosh, I've got to jump through this hoop, jump through that hoop, fill this little thing in, make sure that, oh, have I got a flow chart, you know?
Chair,
so,
respectfully, I don't think that was really the problem.
Sorry?
Respectfully, I don't think the name of the form was the problem. I think most people, in my experience, people were getting put off by either it getting battered back by officers or not getting through the corporate overview group itself. You know, with a much higher level of people putting requests through than things that actually made it through. So I don't think the form tinkering, renaming the form, whilst might be nice, you know, I think how the chickens are coming home to roost in terms of how the requests have been dealt with.
Well, that leads me on to another point. I put in a request and I realised I was going to be too late. But there was nothing on the work programme. Then suddenly, and it's important, I agree, suddenly we had this item on the work programme. And I thought, well, now how did that get there? Sorry to say, it did rather look like one rule for officers and one rule for members. And that doesn't encourage members to put through scrutiny items. I do understand why it happened, because as there was nothing on the agenda, this would have had to be cancelled. That would have been wasting officer time, etc. And this was an important item, but we should have had that explained to us, because otherwise you get this feeling that, hey, hang about, why is that being rejected? Because there's something better. But whatever councillors have to say is important. I do know that through being on COG, very important, and it is weighed up and balanced very carefully. So please encourage your members to bring items forward. Having said that, one of the reasons we probably don't get so many items now is because we're an extremely well-run council. So anyway, can I say thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you all for your contributions, which have been, yes, very, very interesting. And I'm sorry that we've been slightly underwhelmed.